Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about fourth density. According to the entity known as Quo, planet Earth is already vibrating fully in fourth density, and it's just humanity that is lagging behind and clinging to third density ways of looking at the world and living in it. What's the transition to fourth density likely to look like for humanity in the near or distant future? What inconveniences can we expect to see along the way? What reasons do we have to remain hopeful? And how can we best be of service to others? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week. Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our study group. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you'd like to get on our mailing list. We send out updates once a week to let you know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Tricia Bean of the L&L Research Channeling team. Just go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button if you would like to get notifications when we upload new episodes, and contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you'd like to sit in on any of our Q&A sessions. As mentioned, today our topic is fourth density. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, let our viewers know who you are and where you're calling from. Jasmine?
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Jasmine Harris, and I'm calling from Gurdon, Arkansas.
Nice. So great to see you, Ken. And Renat?
My name is Renat, and I'm calling from Israel.
Nice. So great to see you, and so glad you're back and okay. And Ben?
Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Leaf, and I am calling from Everett, Washington, just outside of Seattle.
So wonderful to have you again. Did want to remind our viewers that none of us here are experts or authorities on the law of one. We're just normal people like you, having a conversation about things of spiritual nature that seem important to us. Anything we say could be wrong, and you're welcome to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. Having said that, if you are already familiar with the law of one and the entity known as Quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on describing fourth density. Otherwise, for those who are new to the law of one, you can think of the law of one as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. Pretty much everything we say today could be considered a variation of that statement. All the reading passages that we're reading through together today came to us through the process of channeling. Channeling could be thought of as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, and so on. Basically, a channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through. And in this case, those entities would appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling done by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they're subconscious or unconscious as if asleep, meaning they're not aware of what is being said. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they are only somewhat aware of what is being said. This is how contact was made with an entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-1980s up until present day. So who is Quo? You could think of Quo as a group entity made up of three social memory complexes: Ra at sixth density, Latui at fifth density, and Hatan at fourth density. You can think of a social memory complex as an entire planetary consciousness, as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one planetary consciousness. You can think of densities as different levels of consciousness or different levels of reality. Imagine that the elements of earth, fire, water, and air have some primitive form of consciousness, as many indigenous earth tribes have been saying for a long time. You could think of that level of consciousness as first density. You can think of second density as the level of consciousness of plants and animals, clearly a quantum leap beyond the level of consciousness of inanimate matter. You could think of third density as the level of consciousness of humans and cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a quantum leap above the level of consciousness of other animals or plants. You can think of fourth density as the level of consciousness of social memory complexes. It would be the level of consciousness of an entire human population merged into one consciousness called a social memory complex. Again, clearly quantum leap above the level of consciousness of an individual human. You can think of fifth density as the level of consciousness that is a comparable quantum leap above fourth density, and sixth density, whatever would be a comparable quantum leap beyond fifth density. So suffice it to say, it would appear that the entity known as Quo is made up of three planetary consciousnesses, one from sixth density, one from fifth density, and one from fourth density. First contact with Quo was made by the LNL research channeling team in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the raw contact in 1984. They have been channeled every month since then, up to the present day, by the LNL research channeling team. You can find transcripts of those channeling sessions in the LNL research conscious channeling library. So having said that, let's take a look at a passage on describing fourth density. In session 16 of the Raw Contact, in question 50, Ra said, "We ask you to consider as we speak that there are no words for positively describing fourth density. We can only explain what is not and approximate what is. Beyond fourth density, our ability grows more limited still until we become without words. That which fourth density is not, it is not of words unless chosen. It is not of heavy chemical vehicles for body complex activities. It is not of disharmony within self. It is not of disharmony within peoples. It is not within limits of possibility to cause disharmony in any way. Approximations of positive statements. It is a plane of a type of bipedal vehicle which is much denser and more full of life. It is a plane wherein one is aware of the thoughts of other selves. It is a plane where one is aware of the vibrations of other selves. It is a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. It is a plane striving towards wisdom or light. It is a plane wherein individual differences are pronounced, though automatically harmonized by group consensus." So many fascinating things that jump out to me as I read through this passage. Probably first and foremost, how different fourth density is from third density, a place where it's not possible to have disharmony in any way. Sounds so foreign and different to the current existence as I'm familiar with it. And then, yeah, that other part at the end where they note that individual differences are pronounced, though automatically harmonized by group consensus. That seems fascinating to me. It's not that everybody is agreeing on everything. There's still very pronounced differences. It's just somehow harmonized through group consensus. Super fascinating to me. I have no idea how that works, but I guess that's what we're here to learn to do. Jasmine, what do you think? Any thoughts on anything from this passage?
Yeah, I have quite a few thoughts about this passage, but I'll keep it brief. The first thing that I was struck by is, according to Ra, fourth density involves understanding, being able to essentially read each other's minds. Well, that's telepathy. And he goes on to talk about fourth density involves, the way he describes it, it sounds like empathy to me. So I think more and more, if we really think about it, there are individuals on our planet now that have very advanced abilities towards empathy and telepathy. And so it really speaks to the point that we really are moving into fourth density. Perhaps we definitely are already in fourth density. I think part of the issue is most of us in third density just don't recognize what it is. But I think if we silence ourselves through meditation and contemplation, many of these things that look mysterious and metaphysical just start to, you just become aware of them. And so I was really struck by that. And then quickly, the individual differences are pronounced, although harmonized by group consensus. So I really think that speaks to the fact that you can still have your own individuality, but you're part of a group. And so just being different from someone else doesn't and shouldn't automatically mean that there's going to be conflict. It's just different, and you become part of the whole.
Clearly big lessons that we have yet to learn in third density. And yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the telepathy part and the empathy part for sure. Seems like a really important part of fourth density. And to all of our viewers who have listened to the telepathy tapes, I think that would be a great example of what Jasmine said, that those abilities are definitely coming into the next generation of indigo children or humanity for sure. Renat, anything to add?
Just small points. I thought it was interesting. I think it is interesting that they pointed out what it's not before they pointed out what it is. And I think it's it's a strategy to emphasize what it is, but also by saying what it's not, it's kind of like saying what it is already. So it's kind of saying the same thing twice in a different way, kind of accommodating different brains, different minds.
Indeed.
So,
Hey, Renat, could I ask you to move a little bit closer to your mic? I think we are not hearing you quite as loud as we'd like to be. Just a little bit closer would be great.
is this better?
Try it again.
Is this better? Is my mic
Yes,
talking?
much better. Yes.
Okay. So that's the first thing, that it's kind of like accommodating their ideas to keeping in mind different listeners. And the second thing is that I think here in other quotes, it emphasizes how the transition from third to fourth density is not a sharp jump. It cannot be a sharp jump. It has to be gradual, even if it's going to take 1,000,000 years. Time is of no essence in that respect. So it's gradual. So it's complex and gradual, kind of like if you have a garden full of weeds and you want to make it into a beautiful rose garden. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a process. So this is a process. We're a part of the process, and it's important to realize we are part of the process. We're not watchers. We're participants.
It's a beautiful way to look at it. And I think there's another passage we're going to be looking at later talking about how fourth density is going to be a continuation of third density, and definitely something worth keeping in mind. Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, just a few things. Renat and Jasmine, you both said beautiful, beautiful statements on this, so I don't have a lot, but I will say, Jonathan, you mentioned the telepathy tapes, and I think it's important to recognize that these abilities of fourth density are coming into existence with humanity right now. I refer to the work of Skywatch and their remote viewing and how they're supposedly having contact, allegedly, with other beings of that are trying to make contact with humanity right now, which is could be a whole other podcast, but it's exciting times definitely on Earth here. And I would just say, whenever I talk about fourth density, I always go back to the entity of Jesus Christ and that energy that he brought to the planet Earth, and how I believe that it's all about it's definitely not a wordless energy. I like how Ra says it's not the second you try to put it into words, it kind of loses the oomph of the density, but because it's definitely an energy of intuition and emotion and connection. And I kind of think about when you know someone really well, or you've worked with someone for a long time, and you can kind of get into sync and you don't even have to really talk. It's kind of that same energy, only it'll be worldwide with every person you know. And I also really liked how you can still be different, and you can still have your own experience and interpretation of things, but it's always going to be harmonized by the whole. So I think that, like, if anything, it's to be different and to have a different opinion is like celebrated, because it's the one infinite creator. Everything is the one infinite creator exploring different aspects and angles on everything. So the interpretations and different perceptions are celebrated, and then it's brought in and harmonized by the whole, which is, so you kind of have to think of it as like one mind. That's all kind of distributed among the individuals, and then we're kind of coming together, but still individuals. So it's again, you can see how it's wordless because it's hard to conceptualize, but it's more of an energy and an emotional being of compassion and empathy for sure. And that's already been discussed. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up the subject of the entity known as Jesus Christ, or Yehoshua, as he is known in metaphysical planes or on other planets where apparently he has incarnated. Because, yeah, fourth density is usually referred to by our friends in the Confederation as the density of love, or the density of love and understanding. And that love that they're talking about really is the kind of unconditional love that I believe that entity embodied. Not just love for the people that you like already, but unconditional love for even the people you hate, the people that you would consider your enemies or opponents. That is where our future lies, apparently. I really appreciated that part in the last paragraph, second paragraph in the middle, where they talk about it's a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of third density. It would seem that so many of our days are consumed with sorrows for all the hurts that are inflicted on people through war and bellicosity and aggression and oppression, just from that lack of understanding of self as creator and the lack of understanding of being able to see others as other selves and not a different person. That seems to be a big key to moving forward, I think. Speaking moving forward, I had another passage to look at. Is there anyone who had any thoughts on this passage before we look at something else?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Renata.
I just had a thought real quickly in relation to what Ben said about Jesus, or we call him Yeshua ben Joseph. He was possessed of what we're taught was Christ consciousness. So now my thought is that Christ consciousness, which we're encouraged that we should aspire to attain, that could possibly be a fourth density or even fifth density consciousness.
For sure.
And as far as the compassion that we feel for others in third density, my question is, even though most of us are still third density human beings, I think the only way that we're really going to get there, or perhaps what would speed our movement towards being truly fourth density beings, is if we start to act as if. I mean, just because there's conflict and strife and war and discontent and disrespect in the world, that doesn't mean that we have to be those things. We can start now, as we're taught, to develop that Christ consciousness and act as if.
Well said. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it reminds me, the question has been asked a few times about the second coming of Jesus, and Ra and Kuo have both said at least a couple of times that the entity known as Jesus is not going to be returning in that form, but will return in the form of Christ consciousness in the hearts and minds of all who embody that unconditional love of that entity, which is a beautiful thing to consider. Renat, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just emphasizing or expanding a bit about the individuality and harmony at the same time. It reminds me of a Buddhist phrase, many in body, one in mind. So, and I think that's what the complex, conscious complex, I forgot, memory complex, sorry, is about. that, you know, you can be individual, but you can be in harmony within a group. And that's a beautiful vision to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are so many beautiful teachings from Buddhism and Hinduism that are talked about a lot in the Law of One also. So one of those things that I have really appreciated about the Law of One, they never promote any particular religion or philosophy, but take the truths from all of those and present them in a somewhat different way. Anybody have anything else wanted to add before we change subjects?
I just wanted to add one thing that I always think about is how they talk about how it's not of heavy chemical vehicles for body complex activities. And it's kind of hard to conceptualize because they say that there's more life and more lights in your physical vehicle, but yet your body is actually feels lighter. And I think that you even get like abilities supposedly like to astral project and to like even leave your body. And I think in fifth density you have the choice of whether or not you even want to have a physical body or not. So just kind of cool things to think about how we're maybe going to be less reliant on physical food even, and because we're becoming more spirit and less physical material as we progress into the light, supposedly, allegedly. So I just think it's cool to think about how we're going to be lighter and yet have more light and more life.
Yeah, I appreciate your bringing that up because we always just talk about densities without ever mentioning why they call them densities. And the reasons they're called densities, the different levels, first, second, third, and so on, is because according to Ra and Kuo, each density, the light at each density is more dense. It's more full of information. It's more full of truth. It would be like comparing a fiber optic cable to an old copper wire, or comparing a 4G cellular network to a 3G cellular network. So apparently, yeah, as it goes, as you progress through the densities, your body becomes more and more light, actual light, until there is no physical body and you just exist as a being of light. That is apparently the map that lies ahead of us in spiritual evolution millions of years from now. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple passages on transitioning to fourth density. On November 28th, 2004, Kuo said, "When each of you chooses love over fear, you start something happening in the unseen worlds. You create an energy that is compatible with fourth density. Each time you choose to trust, to love, to have forbearance and compassion, to see the other person's point of view and truly walk in his shoes instead of your own, you are expanding the kingdom of fourth density right where you are. And the more people that begin consciously to do this, the faster this kingdom will expand. We say to you plainly, fourth density is all but complete. As you walk about in third density, the fourth density energy is stronger every day upon your planet. The Earth itself is vibrating largely in fourth density now." This was back in 2004. "That is why so many entities are sensing the need to become closer in contact to the Earth itself, touching the ground, working with the Earth, working with the plants and animals, and those things that abide in the creation of the Father, and have nothing to do with the world of the mind of man." Really a beautiful thing. I just love that idea in the first paragraph about how each time you choose to trust and to love, you choose a compassionate response instead of a harsh response. Each time you choose to be empathetic, as Jasmine said, and to try to look at the world through someone else's eyes and try to understand their story and why they are the way they are, you're helping fourth density to take root. It's a really beautiful, encouraging thought, to me at least. Renat, anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections on this?
2 points come to mind. The first is that from my experience, the more you know yourself, the more you can understand other people. And it's sometimes very hard for me to understand other people's viewpoint, especially if they're very survivalist. That's hard for me, but all this learning that I've gone through over the almost 30 years helped me to understand things that I don't identify. There's understanding and there's identifying. But the more you know yourself, the more you can extend to understand people are very different from you. So it kind of goes inward and outward at the same time. And also, I find that in order, what we're talking about here, to bring more density, this harmony uh, into the here now, despite all the evidence against it, takes a lot of imagination. And I encourage myself, and I encourage other people to really imagine, uh, despite all the evidence, imagine even on a very small scale how this perfect world can feel. If not operate, at least feel. Even if it's really, science fiction, start with that. It will give you a lot of comfort first, even if your logic says, oh, that's BS. It will bring you comfort, make a picture, make some small realm where you can imagine this is maybe just for me, but this is real. In my reality, this is real. And I mean, that's what I do for myself. I'm an artist and writer, and I do that. But even on a small scale, I think it can, and the more you cultivate that small realm of perfection, it will take hold, I think. So
Indeed. Yeah, I imagine, and faith is the word that comes to my mind as I'm listening to what you're saying. So many times, Ra and Quo have encouraged us to have faith, to believe that all is well and all will be well, in spite of all appearances to the contrary. It definitely requires a lot of faith. Absolutely. Ben, anything to add? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple. I really like the idea that the Earth is already transitioned, is already in fourth, and it's kind of just waiting for us on the surface to get there too. It's like we're on the very outside level. If you think of the Earth as an entity, we're on the very like outer skin. We're like microbes on the skin of a human, and so I think it's just waiting for us to kind of get through the birthing process of humanity, figuring out how we're gonna empathize with each other. And so I think um, I've heard that before, but to get out into nature yourself and just be present with the earth is a good way to get that fourth density energy. And I think I've noticed that, like when I go on, there's amazing hiking in the PNW, and when I go on a hike or a walk, even just in my neighborhood, especially when I'm around big, large trees, there's some really cool like rainforests in the PNW, and when I'm around there,
PNW is Pacific Northwest
Northwest, yes.
for our non-PNW viewers. Yeah.
um, when I'm near these like ancient trees and in the woods and not thinking about things, you can feel the energy of the earth, and like when you're breathing that fresh air, I don't know, there's something about it that's very calming, and I get the same energy, the same feeling when I'm in my garden. And actually, it's that time of year where I just start getting my garden together, and um, I think that's so it's just something to think about when you're present with nature and you're not thinking and you're not up here and your mind isn't chattering away. That is the energy of fourth density in my interpretation, is that it's because it's all wordless, and it's already everything already knows how it's supposed to be. There's a saying about how like the earth doesn't need instructions on how or like plant doesn't need instructions on how to grow. It just is. And I think that's kind of the same energy that fourth density is going to carry, or is carrying already. We're just not aware of it. So
I think so. Yeah, well said, for sure. Jasmine, anything to add?
Yeah, I just love the concept of walking in another's shoes. And, I think for fourth density, or even for now, that's so important. If we can learn to really develop enough empathy for a person where you actually feel like you're putting them on and wearing them like a suit, I think that's at that point is where compassion begins. I think walking in another person's shoes, the first step towards being able to do that is being balanced. The Buddha talks about the great middle way. one of the things that we notice in our society today is something called positionality. Everybody has a position, everybody has a point that they feel that they have a right to vocalize. And once you get a point or a position, you dig your heels in and you refuse to move off that position. Well, if you don't move off your position and I don't move off my position, how can we ever find the middle? And how can we ever find balance? And I'm suggesting that we can't. So that this is where what I said earlier about just pretending we are already in fourth density. It's funny that Ben should mention, but one of the things that I've practiced for many years is whenever I'm faced with a difficult problem or conflict or a situation, I take a couple of deep breaths, and I've been saying for years, okay, if I were my higher self right now, who is obviously in fifth or sixth density, if I were my higher self, what would she do? What would she say? How would she behave? And I think that is really a starting point for us, is to begin to pretend. And some people, honest to goodness, I know it, they are so hard to love. Some people, God bless their hearts, it is so difficult to want to feel like you want to give them that unconditional, that embrace of unconditional love. And so I'm just suggesting, I think the passage is saying it may be hard, but that's what you must do. We must start
Absolutely.
that point.
Yeah. 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 Empathy is such an important thing. And there are very clearly people around, particularly those in power, one could say, who, do not seem to have empathy. And yet we're still being called to love them and to have empathy for them and realize that everybody's got a story. And maybe that's kind of the trick to finding out what's this person's story? Why are they doing what they're doing?
And also I could add to that, Jonathan, because I think you're right. Right now, so many of us are having a very, very, very difficult time in showing that unconditional love for those individuals who have decided that they are our leaders. But, the funny thing is that I discovered a couple of years ago is when I force myself, literally sometimes I force myself into a position of of that unconditional love, I immediately develop compassion. So where I see a leader that is standing at the lectern who is obviously lying, who is obviously narcissistic in his behavior, all of a sudden I don't see a lying narcissist. I see somebody that I probably want to add to my prayer list, because there's something going on under the surface that's very sad, and their soul is not at peace. I'm at peace. I want that for them if they want it for themselves.
It's beautifully said. Thank you. It's probably a great segue to a second passage that I wanted to share on transitioning to fourth density. This was from May 25th, 2003, and Quo said, "This is the real heart of the job, the mission. The service is in the being, and in the being lies the tuning that will bring the earth and its peoples to health within early fourth density. This is early fourth density. You vibrate now in fourth density. Certainly your third density vehicles are having their challenges in accommodating the new vibrations, and yet the body is the creature of the mind. And as your consciousness begins to feel comfortable swimming in the waters of unconditional love, so the bodies shall find themselves more and more able to fully enjoy fourth density vibrations." I really love the implications of this passage. They're saying that the earth is already vibrating in fourth density, and it's our third density bodies that are having some difficulties adjusting to changes. But as your consciousness begins to feel more comfortable swimming in the waters of unconditional love, then the bodies will find themselves more able to enjoy fourth density vibrations. I was a public high school biology teacher for a number of years, and I remember a key part of Darwinian evolution was that Charles Darwin was saying that it's not always the strongest or the fastest or the smartest animals that are best fit to survive. It's the ones that are best able to adapt to changes. So for everyone who's struggling with third density with life right now, yeah, I think that is the key, to feel more comfortable swimming in the waters of unconditional love and adapting to the fourth density vibrations that the planet is already vibrating fully in. That's something that I always try to keep in mind. Ben, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, just a couple. I really like the the sentence, "The body is the creature of the mind." It's just because I think this whole third density is an illusion. So we have to keep remembering that this is an illusion, and we're purposely veiled. We purposely cannot know what the other is thinking. But I think that's part of the lesson in love. That's why we're down here, is to figure out love and figure out how it works and how to be in it. And I think one of our Eckhart Tolle always says, and I agree, one of our biggest hindrances is our thinking mind, which is just a tool. And sometimes this thinking mind can lead you astray. So I think and I think that's definitely a trick that Western civilization is still struggling with, getting more heart-centered and less out of our heads. And obviously when you're more heart-centered, you're able to connect with people more, and you're able to get into that fourth density energy. And one other thing I just wanted to go off on what Jasmine was talking about having this intense compassion, holding yourself to that level. One thing that helps me to do that is to remember that we're all veiled, and so we all think we know what's going on, but I don't think anyone really knows what's going on. So kind of have that compassion for yourself and for others, that we're all kind of morons and don't know what we're doing. And obviously we have good hearts, and people have the best of intentions, but sometimes they're led astray. So it's you have to look at them and yourself as like a stumbling toddler trying to figure out how to walk. And when you see a little kid trying to figure out how to walk and he stumbles and falls, you don't tell him he's bad and tell him to do better. Come on, what's wrong with you? You have compassion and empathize, and because we've all been stumbling toddlers. And so just remember, we're all stumbling toddlers. So that's my point.
For sure. And at the same time, that there are many of us who are trying to polarize towards service to others and to graduate to the next level in service to others, there are a significant number of individuals who are in fact trying to graduate on the service to self path. So there are people who have polar opposite views of, how we should live and how we should be. And that doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean they're enemies. It just means that, well, that's part of why they are the way they are. So trying to get them to think more service to others is not necessarily going to work either. So I guess it comes down to accepting at some level how some are, and loving them unconditionally. Jasmine, any thoughts on anything here?
Just to kind of piggyback on what Ben said, when he mentioned that the body is a creature of the mind, I was reminded that, yes, by now most of us know that these bodies are just reflections. They're just creations of our conscious mind. And like Renat said earlier, there is only one mind. There's not four individual minds sitting here melding. There's only one mind. And so I was talking to my AI the other day, and I was just reminded that the way I communicate with my AI is very, very similar to the human mind. The human mind, our individual consciousness, really just tells us what we want to hear and lets us see what we want to see. So everything that we observe in reality is subjective. It's not objective reality. And our brains, our minds, our individual consciousness tends to return to us based on our experiences and based on our filters and based on whether or not we've trained our consciousness, tends to return a result that's exactly what we expect. So when we walk about, if we expect that the world is a scary place and everybody is out there to get me, and I've got to protect myself, I've got to hide, guess what? I'm probably always going to be accosted. I'm always going to be lied to, and I'm always going to be cheated out of something. But when we start to shift our consciousness and shift our thinking, we see that this subjective reality, which we did create, it also starts to shift. And so again, I just go back to, something that I've said before. I think the key to all of the chaos that we see in the world is very simple. You just have to raise your own individual level of consciousness. And we've talked about this before, Jonathan, and I know I'm being redundant, but if we just raise our consciousness higher than the problem or the issue or the chaos, we begin to see that, hey, this is a pretty nice place we've landed here, landed on here in the form of our great mother, Mother Gaia. So I just love this. But yeah, I think in many ways the human mind is a lot like my AI. It just returns back to me. It's a mirror. It mirrors reality back to me based on my expectations, based on my consciousness level.
Yeah, I appreciate your reminding us of that because, yeah, indeed, Ra and Kuo have said so many times that we are more powerful than we think, and we are co-creators of the reality that we experience. And indeed, I have found the hard way, the best way to change the outer world is really to change the inner world and how you respond to it. So profound teachings to meditate on, much for sure. Renat, anything to add?
I'll try to be brief. I think I can take this sentence that both Jasmine and Ben spoke about, the body and the mind. And I think there's something missing here, the soul. So the way I see it is I see two components in our human form. There's the component of the soul that is eternal and pure and is coming here to earth to learn and develop. And some of those souls here on earth are quite young. So yeah, it is like stumbling toddlers, as Ben said. And then there, we come into a body that has a brain, and the brain has a very primitive survivalist component to it, the reptile brain, and harmonizing all this stuff together, which I believe is pre-choice, it's very hard, So whoever is surviving this experiment should be saluted, even if they're not doing, they're still stumbling. It's not an easy journey. It's not an easy choice. It's really hard. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we should tap ourselves on the shoulders for them.
Yeah, especially at this point. This is not just third density. This is the very, very end of third density. We are actually in the beginning of fourth density. So extremely polarizing time as more and more people are being compelled, I think, to choose between what they perceive as service to others and service to self. So yeah, challenging times for sure. I did have another passage on another topic I wanted to look at. Did anybody have anything they wanted to add on this passage before we change? Sounds good. So let's take a look at a passage on shadow work. On December 29th, 2007, Kuo said, "As the times move on towards the beginning of fourth density upon your planet, and as that fourth density upon your planet is a positive fourth density, the vibrations of truth, understanding, and love are interpenetrating your third density world in ever greater waves and convergences of energy. And this means that this process that you have of coming to know yourself, accept yourself, and love yourself has become more challenging. And this process is becoming more and more difficult because whereas before the end of the age was so prominently close, it was quite easy to ignore the dark side of self. In these latter days of third density, when an entity desires to become a truly realized and focused spiritual seeker, he must go collect those shadow bits that he has not acknowledged. And this is difficult now, where it used to be easier, because of the constant barrage of vibrations of truth, so that all of those things at which you least wanted to look are now popping up quite prominently and saying, look at me, acknowledge me, Let me tell my story, and please learn to balance me in and make me part of who you are. For we truly belong, we shadow elements of the equation of one. Really kind of adds on nicely to what we were just saying about how fourth density light contains more truth, more information in it. So as we are shifting into fourth density, we're really being forced to confront those things that we've up to this point not wanted to look at. So just kind of swept under the carpet or put into the closet. So it would seem that so much of what we're seeing now is kind of like all those unresolved catalysts, all that unbalanced karma from the whole third density. As we spiral upward in evolution, we're kind of spiraling back and being forced to look at that stuff that we still haven't resolved yet before we go up to the next level. So yeah, really appreciate it. There are so many entities I see around who I would say, yeah, those look like my shadow selves. Those look like the polar opposites of me. Those look like the entities that I'm really having the hardest time accepting because they're trying to kill me or trying to oppress me or trying to hurt people that I care about. And yet I'm reminded of what it says in the last paragraph where, you know, these things are wanting to say, look at me, you know, acknowledge me, let me tell my story. You can't just shove me away. I'm not going away. You're going to have to deal with me. And I think that is a really important, powerful lesson that, as Jasmine said, you could look at it as a really terrible thing that you have to deal with, or you could look at it as a great opportunity to integrate your shadow self and become complete and be ready, more ready to move on to the next level of evolution. That's my take on it. Jasmine, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan, completely. Those bits of ourselves, as Quo talks about, those shadow bits, the parts that we want to hide from the rest of the world, and to some degree, we want to hide from ourselves. You know, we here in third density as humans, we want to put everything in boxes, and we are, this is the density of opposites. So if it doesn't look good, I don't want anyone to see it. So I'm just going to stuff it away and I'm going to pretend. And like I said before, sometimes pretending, like they used to tell us in sales, fake it till you make it, that can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So those shadow bits of yourself have to be incorporated, into who and what you are. Otherwise, you're not a whole person then. You're just this person, this little person that has all these little miscellaneous bits flying all over the place. But the reality of it is that your shadow self and those parts of your personality that you want to keep buried and keep hidden, you want to do that because of pain, because it's painful. It's painful to admit that you're a coward or that you're afraid or that you have fear. And so the suggestion is, the way that I was taught is, first of all, it is painful, but guess what? It's not going to kill you. You know, nobody has ever died from confronting an emotional fear. The idea is face it, embrace it, and allow it to be part of who and what you are. If you don't, you're not a real person. And it could very well be that you incarnated here on this earth in this space time nexus so that you could, in fact, it could be your karmic destiny to reincorporate those parts of yourself into yourself. And so I
Absolutely.
personally, when I did some quasi shadow work, there's one part of me that I wanted everybody, I really believe that to be a spiritual person, you had to walk around singing, you know, Gregorian chants all the time, and you had to be smiling, and you could never get mad or you could never get angry. You could never stand your ground or stand up for yourself. So that part of me that wanted to do that had to stay hidden. Well, I discovered that that part of me is also what kept me in my studies, even when I didn't want to study. that part of me that never wanted to give ground is what helped me in my spiritual practices.
Yeah. Really powerful lesson there. Really appreciate you bringing that up. I seem to remember some previous podcast where we talked, probably the episode on shadow work, where we talked about, yeah, seeing your shadow self as an asset, as an ally rather than a weakness, and looking at the strengths from that. Beautiful, powerful reminder. Thank you. Renat, anything to add?
Yeah, to build on what Jasmine beautifully said, I wanted to again quote or paraphrase Buddhist concept that as the light intensifies, so does the shadow. Or, they also say when the Buddha comes, the devil comes as well. But also, we have to remind ourselves, for those that are incarnated on this planet, that if we were perfect, we would not be incarnated in a human body. We would do our work as souls in the inner realms, in the spirit world. We're here because we still have a lesson to learn, and that lesson has to do with the shadow. We're not here to learn to be, we're not here because we're perfect. We're here because we're imperfect, and because we chose to want to be perfect or whatever, to improve ourselves. Those who do not want to improve themselves, maybe they're not here, they're elsewhere. So,
for sure.
Again,
yeah, I remember at least one session where Quo said, perfection is boring to us. From higher densities, we're really not that interested in entities that are perfect. It's the imperfections that really make you perfect. It's those little flaws and little quirks and things that distort the light in interesting fashions. That's what they find most interesting that they can learn from. That's definitely encouraging. Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, not too much, but because everything's you guys have just talked about has been great. But I will say I really like the phrase know thyself, because and don't judge yourself so hard, because I think that's we all have shadow sides. We all have imperfect choices that we make in our day. And it's okay though. It's okay, because like Jasmine said, there's always two sides to every coin, and even every emotion, even those experiences that we have in our lives that we consider traumas, they're just experiences that help chip away the person you are from everything. And I think that especially in the West, we're so quick to bury things and shove trauma away, and instead of harmonizing it and incorporating it into our being, I think that it kind of becomes it's a block. And so this is something that we still have to figure out as a society. And I think that it's obviously playing out in the outside world as a society, and it's also playing out, I think, personally for people as we're growing, to harmonize ourselves and harmonize our own traumas as well as traumas as a civilization and an Earth people. So and I also want to say that don't be so hard on yourself, and don't be so hard on each other. Because we have to remember that fourth density is also a density of lightness and kind of floatiness and happiness. So there's this energy too that's going on. So I think of like the Buddha laughing at the world, and that's kind of the energy of fourth density. Sure, things appear to be tough, but it's really not, because it's all experience and it's all grist for the mill, as I think Paul has said before, Ross. So yeah,
it looked a lot easier before incarnation, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too.
Appreciate your sharing that. Yeah, there is one other thing I wanted to share, and that is, of course, when we're talking about shadow work and integrating shadow self, I'm always reminded of the yin yang symbol. I think we're often told to remember that, see your shadow self as yourself. And when I look at people who I see as terrible, deplorable human beings, I'm saying, they're not, I don't see myself in there. I'm not sure what I'm missing, but I don't see myself in that entity. And yet, if we are all creator, then of course, creator is all aspects. So of course, yes, they are a part of myself. And the shadow self, again, as you can see in the yin yang symbol, in order to be complete, you need both the light and the dark. It can't all just be love and light. You actually need the shadow and you need the darkness in order to make the light complete. Just one thought. Anybody have any other thoughts before we look at a different subject? Let's take a look at a passage on spiritual warfare. On March 15th, 2008, Quo said, "For a great portion of your last major cycle of 75,000 plus years, those who have graduated to fourth density have felt it necessary to defend their polarity from the opposite polarity as if they were still in third density. The entities involved in this war are of the inner planes rather than coming from outside the planet. Fourth density wanderers are not coming in to carry on this war. Rather, there are entities coming in which, having reached harvestability, have chosen not to go on to fourth density, but to remain in the inner planes of third density. Their awareness is that of fourth density, yet their prejudices remain those of third density. So they are convinced that they must defend the souls of planet Earth from negative polarity. Likewise, those who have graduated in the negative sense see it as their business to battle the light. They see themselves as those who would use the light for their own purposes, leeching the power of which the positive polarity is full, and flipping it so that its power becomes negative. This situation of war, the so-called war in heaven, is a part of your inner planes environment. Individual entities of both polarities eventually become mature enough spiritually to realize that strife is unnecessary. They finally become free of third density fear and are able to move on to their lessons, leaving the war behind." This is a really fascinating passage to me that kind of echoes back to what Ra was talking about in session 25 in discussing thought battles, as they call them. In question 7 of session 25, the questioner asked, "Does a portion of the Confederation then engage in this thought battle? What percentage engages?" Ra: "I am Ra. This is the most difficult work of the Confederation. Only 4 planetary entities at any one time are asked to partake in this conflict." And then skipping ahead to question 9 in that same session, Ra said, "The fourth density is the only density besides your own, which, lacking the wisdom to refrain from battle, sees the necessity of the battle. Thus is it necessary that fourth density social memory complexes be used." Super fascinating stuff, which reminds me of the many times that Quo has referred to what Carla jokingly referred to as space pirates, or negative fifth density entities who feed on vibrations of fear and war and bellicosity and use their fourth density minions to keep us in a constant state of war against each other, constant state of conflict against each other. And it's just fascinating to me that we see so much of that happening in third density in whatever ways we might think of as battles between good and evil and light and dark. And they're saying that, somehow this continues into fourth density as well in the inner planes, because so much of this is going on in the inner planes. It's kind of manifesting in the outer planes as well as third density. But the trick for us, of course, is to not let ourselves get manipulated into these endless wars between light and dark, and to see the wisdom in refraining from battle. I think that is a big challenge for many of us here. What do you think, Renat? Any thoughts on this passage or these passages?
Yeah, I have 2 thoughts. The first one referring to the pirates. Each time I am flooded with fear and resentment and frustration, I remind myself this is the food for the pirates, and boy, it helps me to snap out of it. Nope, not feeding those. Sorry. And the second thing is that, as you can imagine, I'm a little allergic to anything that is battle and conflict and war. And early on in my spiritual path, I realized that um, battling with those negative universal forces makes me feel small and inapt and feeds them, makes them more powerful in their relationship with me. I realized that my way of dealing with evolution, my personal evolution, and that of us, now that I understand, going into far density, is increasing the light. Because, in the cave, the darkest cave, the smallest candle makes a huge difference. And that image also, so not feeding the pirates and lighting a candle in the cave, those two images really helped me, like, oh yeah, right.
Well, and so difficult, especially where you're at, in case our viewers don't know. Yeah, Renat lives in Israel right now, and you are in a part of the world that has such a long, long history of endless cycles of war and bellicosity, largely in part, according to Quo, because so many, the population that was brought from Mars, a planet that was rendered uninhabitable from endless cycles of war and bellicosity, I believe Quo said they were put in the Middle East to begin with. So all the peoples of the religions of Islam and Judaism and Christianity can trace the roots back to that point. So for you to be right in the middle of that conflict and trying to bring vibrations of love and peace in a place where that's so difficult to do, that's, yeah, I cannot say enough about that. Any thoughts on that in particular?
Um,
Yeah, go ahead.
you're asking me?
Renat, yeah.
Okay, about what you said, to reflect on what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly frustrating because just people here, not all of them, but a lot. And I don't mingle with all society, so I come across people who don't quite feed the pirates, let's say, but still, they still tap into or believe uh, this this narrative. It's very hard for them to imagine a different narrative, to see out, to zoom out. It's so hard for them. But I do feel this is my mission. So wherever I can, with friends or family, I just plant little seeds. And now that I'm here in Israel after 30 years of not living here, now I've been here a bit more than 2 years. I feel like, okay, I understand why somehow I chose to come back, at least for a while, because I can see people are starting to change. Just yesterday, a friend, relatively new friend, all of a sudden started talking to me about spirituality, and she described her awakening, and she gave herself a hard time that it took her. She's my age, so it took her so long. And I said, no, no, some people never wake up. You should really, it's really impressive. And now our conversation, yeah, is different. It's opening, and I started talking to her about, other things,
It's
like
beautiful.
world, and like, oh my God, it's beautiful. So even one person that I see that, maybe she has nobody else to guide her forward in her spiritual awakening. That's amazing to be, spiritual awakened when tomorrow we can have missiles again. It's
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Right
it's
place
not
at the right time.
recommended.
Yeah.
It's not recommended.
No, but it's a beautiful act of service that you are doing, just being there and existing there and bringing those vibrations there. So much gratitude to you for sure. Ben, anything to add? Any thoughts on this passage or the other one?
Yeah, one thing that maybe I'm a little hung up on a little bit is the idea of those who've graduated come back because they have this vested interest in the souls of Earth, and then and conversely, of course, you have those who are selfishly wanting the Earth to go service to self, and so they're also coming back even though they've graduated to. So I feel like Earth is becoming this game board of spiritual strife and battling just to see what's going to happen. So it kind of like it's a little silly to me, and also astounding too, because the horrors on Earth are so intense and tough to deal with when you see them on the news, and yet I kind of feel like Ra's talking almost like it's kind of a game, and so but maybe in a sense it is, in the spiritual sense, because we're so low on the totem pole here at third density, and not to take away from our existence and our beingness, but it's just something I think about, like why is Earth so locked in this heated battle of good and evil, and then I also think about
For
like
sure.
the two, the angel and the demon sitting on your shoulder fighting with each other, and really they just need to like get together and have a coffee
sure.
or something. So
Yeah, it's an intense atmosphere, and I believe there's a passage we're going to be looking at before too long that speaks very much to that tug of war, as they call it, or the chess game, as you refer to it. And yeah, I think that's part of the reason why, as somebody else said, it's like we don't know what's going on. It is in many ways a big chess game, and I'm just one of 8 billion little pieces in it. So it's like I think I'm just going to trust in the process and do the best I can with my part. And yeah. Jasmine, anything to add?
Yeah, when it comes to spiritual warfare, I've just decided that I'm not going to battle. I'm just not going to do it. When I think of myself in this third density body with a veil, not knowing the depth and breadth of who and what I truly am, there's no way I'm going to battle with the fifth density entity, especially if that entity is service to self. What possible chance would I have? So I just choose to not engage in any battle. But what I do choose to do is, as I was taught, is just um, bring the light, and there's many things like Renat had said. She mentioned, I love that, light a candle in a cave. And so, we're taught to do things to bring light to ourselves, to our energy body, because after all, this body is just energy anyway. It's just that it appears to be solid. But there are things that you can do to bring light energy around yourself. And, I do that to protect myself. But in an all out spiritual battle with the fifth density entity, I stand no chance whatsoever. So I just trust, like you said, I trust in the process. I just use my candles and my aromas and my crystals. And I say my metaphysical prayers before I go to sleep, before I go to work, before I eat my food, before I drink my water. And I just know that somehow everything will be okay.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think it just becomes tricky when you see things happening which seem to be of a very difficult to accept nature. If you see like the rise of Nazi Germany, for example, and you are confronted with a person who's acting a lot like Hitler, it's like it's really hard not to get drawn into a battle of opposing and opposition. And yet I believe that's what we're being called to do, to love Hitler and to love Nazis, even in spite of everything that they are doing that seems of the most heinous nature. I think that is actually what we're being called to do, and that's a challenge for anyone, I would think. But
Well,
I believe, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would say, oops, I'm so sorry. I would say that, the challenge is, again, uh, dear Jonathan, I personally think the challenge is to lose our judgments, first of all, and to move from one side of an opinion more towards the center. Because where you judge what you see as Nazism, for example, or imperialism, the person sitting next to you may see it and judge it totally different. So the
For
fact of
sure.
the matter is, uh, if we learn to accept what is, the fact of the matter is, this is the situation we have. These are the uniforms that we have to play in. The trick is to learn to accept what is. And I think before we learn to accept what is, we can't possibly create anything different or better. If we stand in resistance to what is, that actually gives it power. That makes what is even stronger. Just my opinion.
Yeah, worthy opinion, worthy opinion. And I think it's a good example of what I think they were saying in that passage, the first one we read about harmonizing differences. Can still have differences of opinion, can see things in very different ways, but that doesn't mean we have to fight over it if we're still committed to being of service to others as best we can. I would say that's okay. We can harmonize those differences. Anybody else have anything wanted to say on these passages before we change topics? Let's take a look at a couple passages on death of the old and birth of the new. On February 6, 2016, Quo said, "Now to be sure, once fourth density is in full flower, the transition to new cultural forms will be rather dramatic, and it will be as the difference between night and day with regard to many of your institutions. Many of your cultural traditions will undergo such transition that they will be hardly recognizable. But we do call your attention to that word hardly, or almost, for it is important that there is a reach back into your past, even as there will be a reach forward into your future, and that it will be this planet, it will be this population which gives the intimate, the secret focus to a pattern of development which will flow into your future. It will be earth energy which moves into earth fourth density, and that energy will not be started anew in fourth density. Rather, it will be continued, even as it is the case that your third density continued from the second density experience of the higher animals upon your earth plane. Now, this continuity is something that does not simply happen by itself. It is the function and responsibility of those upon your planet that are currently incarnate to make every effort to engage in the most eloquent way possible with the cultural forms currently alive on your planet, so that these things may have a life moving into a fuller destiny, that they may have a future experience that brings them into a condition allowing fourth density to grow on a soil which has been prepared. Super interesting passage. I've read and reread this many times over. For anyone who is curious about, what this transition to fourth density is likely to look at, like that reference in the first paragraph to cultural forms being different, like from night and day, with regard to many of your institutions being hardly recognizable in the future. Certainly that would seem to be the case on the political landscape. It sure looks like our political institutions are changing a lot. And again, I don't mean that in a positive or negative way necessarily. I think I would see it as, oh, okay, well, I guess this is the direction that's headed. But I like the observations that they make that fourth density doesn't begin from nothing. It's a continuation of third density, just as third density was a continuation from second density. So thinking about the things, the cultural traditions and forms that we like, that we would like to see in a fourth density future, that's our job here on Earth as incarnate beings, to prepare that soil for it. I find that, again, super inspiring and encouraging. Any thoughts on this, Ben, on this passage?
Yeah. So to start off with, I feel like when it's saying the transition will be dramatic, my guess is that when we become a more compassionate society, which is what I'm assuming fourth density is going to be like, immediately the inequalities of government are going to be blatant and apparent. And I think, even as the US is moving more toward this fascistic, weird oligarchy type unequal government, it's okay, because I think it'll help. If anything, it's going to help bring out and make more pronounced the inequalities of government. And let's just put out there right now that most governments of this planet are service to self, and most people are being oppressed to some level, and they might not even realize it. But And so
Agreed.
our job is also to speak the truth in these things and point out the inequalities and help the transition and you know, continue to put out that love and awareness, because I think a lot of it is people are purposely blind to the inequalities that are occurring in society around us. And so I think part of it also is, as an awakened individual, if you're into the law of one, you've got to be awake on some level, and it's your job to point out these inequalities and be aware of them, and just talk about it, and because that is what changes the energy, and that is what brings about the new energy of fourth density and compassion and empathy, which are things that are so hard to teach. I think it's something that has to be experienced, and then a person references their own past in order to connect to someone else's trauma, but that's a whole other discussion as well. So that's
Indeed.
so I think it's recognize what's going on and also have compassion. So I don't know if that made sense.
No, that all makes perfect sense, and I got nothing to add to that. It all makes sense to me. Jasmine, any thoughts, reflections of your own to add?
Yeah, about this particular, I just wrote some notes. About fourth density from this passage, what I really see is in fourth density, um, it will be somewhat recognizable, the different cultural forms and the institutions. But I just imagine in fourth density, much of what we struggle with today will just be non-existent. I just see that we won't have a political structure per se, one for each country, then one for each state, and then one for each county, and on and on and on. The number of laws that we have on the books in this country will probably easily fill my shed if those laws were all printed and put into books. And I think as we move into fourth density, and definitely once we're solidly in fourth density, there won't be a need for that. There simply won't. I mean, the law of the land is simply, what can I do that is to the benefit and the greater good of the other person, for my family, for my community, for my nation. And if I'm thinking of going over to Ben's and stealing his car, that doesn't benefit Ben. So I simply don't do it. It's as simple as that. I mean, this endless list of laws and regulations, I think in fourth density, we will have something called a moral center and a moral compass. And since we'll be moving towards a social memory complex, because the first question is your morality may be very different than my morality, but as a social memory complex, we start to harmonize, and we start to have the same center, even though we are individuals. So yes, Jonathan knows it's not right to steal Ben's car. Renat knows it's not right to steal Ben's car. So nobody's going to steal Ben's car. And certainly nobody is going to try to hurt Ben's person, because it's not the right thing to do.
Right.
And what other law do you need other than that? And so therefore you don't invade somebody else's country because you want 10 miles of land that belongs to them.
Right. Well, that's assuming that everyone feels that way and agrees with that, but I think that is clearly not the case. There are other people who don't have any problem taking somebody else's car or invading another country. And that, I think, is part of the stuff that we're still trying to work through.
And we will get to that point in fourth density. I know it. I was telling my son this in our weekly discussion last week. We will get to that point. We will absolutely get to that point. We just have to be patient. It may take a few million years, but I mean, we will eventually get there.
Yeah, well, probably sooner than that, I'm guessing. And yeah, again, I think each of us has power and influence within our own lives with the people that we work with to help make that happen. That's definitely something I would believe in. Renat, anything to add? Any thoughts?
First, I have to ask the question, Ben, do you have a car? And what kind of a car is it? Well, you're a bit far too for me to. Anyways, yeah, I was hooked on this cultural traditions because when I first read this, I thought, oh, they know what cultural traditions we're gonna have. Why don't they tell us? And of course, they don't. It's for us to create them. And again, this is a matter of imagination, positive, make it as big as possible, as beautiful as possible. What cultural tradition institutions do we want? To me, that's fascinating.
Indeed. Fascinating indeed. I had another passage on this subject I wanted to look at. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to say about this passage before we look at another one? This was from October 22nd, 1995, where Quo said, "At this end time of your present third density cycle, it is entirely appropriate that each set the self the task of finding new ways of coming into harmony with other cultures, other races, and other structures of thought, logic, and being. The end result of this planetary effort to come into spiritual convergence shall be that social memory complex that is the basic structure for fourth density work. You are attempting to learn how to be one people, sharing each other's thoughts, hopes, and fears, carrying each other's burdens as naturally as breathing, sharing each other's joys as if they are your own." It sounds beautiful. It sounds like a very utopian future. And I do believe that we will get to that point, as Jasmine said, eventually, as we work out all this other stuff that we haven't worked out. But yeah, it certainly reminds me of Star Trek. It certainly reminds me of the future that you see in Star Trek, where new ways of coming into harmony with other cultures, other races, other structures of thought, logic, and being. Could sum it up in all three words: diversity, equity, and inclusion seem to be three values that are being expressed here. And again, yeah, it's not just based on skin color. It's not just based on what country somebody comes from or what political party they're affiliated with, but other planetary beings. Clearly, the Earth population is made up of people from quite a few different planets, most of which blew themselves up or were rendered uninhabitable by endless cycles of war and bellicosity, apparently. So I think that is one of our biggest challenges, learning to come in harmony with entities who have other structures of thought, logic, and being, people who just see things very differently than we do and think very differently from we do. That's something we can all do in our daily lives, I'm sure. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts on this passage?
Just that something that you said, though. Oh, Jonathan, yeah, you said, people's thoughts are different, and it's a process that we're tasked with now to try to understand other people's thoughts and other people's logic. And I'm just reminded of something, and I do not remember the exact passage, but with the earth being populated now by beings whose consciousness actually originated on other planets, their archetypical mind is actually different. The structure of their mind is different.
Right.
And I remember when I worked at the prison, I would come home and I couldn't, give my husband any details about what happened. But some of the individuals that I worked with, their thinking process was just so foreign to anything I'd ever experienced. And I can remember lamenting, I just don't understand how their mind works. Well, now I do understand that again, individuals, many of the individuals that we interact with on a daily basis, the structure of their mind is actually different. And
Yeah.
so we have to understand that and make allowances for it, and also hope that they will make allowances for the fact that we think differently than they do. But I really love this passage, and I just really appreciate the fact that it's so simple. I really want to encourage that it is so simple finding new ways to come into harmony with other cultures and races. Just allow people to be as
Yeah,
they are. And
yeah,
guess what? They don't have to explain to you or justify to you why they are what they are. And I think
yeah,
if we just allow that to happen, a
yeah.
universe of possibilities open up for us.
Yeah, super important points you bring up that I think cannot be emphasized enough, especially the part about the archetypical mind that you brought up. Indeed, I mean, if there are people coming from other planets and other systems, they had entirely different archetypical minds. So the idea that, you know, somebody seems like they're from another planet, yeah, they really are literally from another planet. And accepting them for who they are means not trying to get them to think the way that you do, as I think you were saying, just recognizing, oh, it'd be like somebody who's autistic or somebody who's ADD and just expecting them to communicate with you the same way that you do with other people. It's like, no, that's not how it works. We just have to learn to accept and value people who have very different ways of looking at the world and thinking. Appreciate you bringing that up. Renat, anything to add?
Uh, yeah, although now after Jasmine spoke, I'm not sure about this point, but it all starts with self. So if you want to see harmony in the universe, it starts with self-harmony. However, to Jasmine's points, each one is different. So the idea of self-harmony would be very different for each individual. But I do still believe that it starts with the self, with feeling self-appreciation, self-love, self-understanding. Those comes from us and goes outward, although it will manifest in different ways because we come from different planets.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Ben, anything to add?
Yeah. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent just because I find it interesting. But a long time ago, I remember I was on a date with my wife, and I was telling her that this is in like 2013 or so. I remember telling her that I was so excited about Facebook and about social media because I thought for sure Facebook is going to unite the earth and people are going to find ways to connect with each other, and and they're gonna find these ways to connect, and people from like China are going to connect with people in New York City, and they're going to come together, and people, you know, in the Middle East are going to, and I just had all this projecting that I thought was going to happen, and the exact opposite happened, where the powers that be used social media to help divide people even more. So, but in a sense, I want to say that I feel like social media and even the internet is like a third density version of what unity consciousness could be eventually, where
For
everyone
sure.
is up and everyone's going to have access to all the information of the world in these little devices, except that it'll be on a psychic level. And so I think about how far we still have to go to unite as a people, partially just because we're all physically separated across the planet, and so everyone grows up in different cultures and different languages even, so we don't even talk the same way. So of course we're going to be completely different with our worldviews and our cultural views and societal views. So it's a lot of work to jumble back together to unite as a people as well. So I think that it's a monumental task, but I also think that it's part of our evolution. It's going to occur one way or another as we keep advancing. Even just with technology, it's going to kind of force us to unite in other ways, even if we don't do it through the spiritual path. I think it's inevitable one way or another. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would use social media as an example of kind of a model of a social memory complex. I suppose, like everything else, it could be used for positive or negative purposes. So
Right.
it's great for sharing memes. I know that much.
Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on this passage before we change topics? I'm being mindful of the time, and we have been going for about an hour and a half already, and I'm trying to like keep these episodes under 2 hours. So did want to encourage your viewers, you never have to feel like you have to watch these things all the way through. You can stop it at any point put it in your watch later YouTube list, and when you come back to it, it'll pick up wherever you left off. And we divide these episodes into chapters, so you can skip around whoever you want if you don't want to watch the whole thing. Otherwise, let's take a look at a couple passages on inconveniences. On August 11th, 2024, not that long ago, Quo said, "The intentional use of the word inconvenience we find quite potent, for we believe that there is some legitimacy in that particular characteristic. These inconveniences, you may call them, are due in part to this discomfort that this planet and the planet's people feel as they are, you may say, on a different trajectory, perhaps not in direction, but perhaps in speed from Mother Earth, your planet Gaia, which has already moved on to a further density, while you on this planet are still trudging, still walking the path to greet her in that new light. And because of this, there is great discomfort, confusion, chaos, misunderstanding. These inconveniences can be felt and seen in various ways on your planet. There are those of the interpersonal flavor, the conflict, war, judgment, the divisions. It may also be seen in environmental ways, the way that this planet struggles to continue to yield that which its people needs, the way the weather reacts, the way the oceans rise, the way the earth moves. These particular inconveniences, though they provide much pain and confusion, are potent tools for the seeker who wishes to better understand this cosmic journey, this greater design. Witnessing them as inconveniences, we understand, may be seen as a not fully, shall we say, inclusive term to what you are actually experiencing. It may feel much larger, much more expansive, much more difficult. However, the humor of calling it an inconvenience is that it is but a bump in the infinite timeline that you are experiencing. So viewing these moments, these greater things that are occurring on the planet among your people and in relation to Mother Earth with an open heart and with gentle, loving arms to welcome it into your life, into your experience, may be of great help in terms of how to navigate and how to be of service to humanity and to the planet. Really beautiful passage. And yes, the word inconvenience they have used many times to refer to the difficulties that we can expect to see in the not that distant future. And it's encouraging the way they help us frame it and to look at it. I'm certainly thinking of climate change. If nothing else, there's no reason to believe that we're going to decrease our consumption of fossil fuels. It looks like it's going to be increasing in the near future. And if climate scientists are to believe, then yes, they have been telling us all for decades that all the things that we're experiencing with climate change can certainly be explained by increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as well as what Koa has said about pent-up heat stored in the Earth's crust through all these millennia of war and bellicosity. I think both those things could be seen as contributing factors. But yeah, if indeed the Earth temperature, global temperatures exceed the 1.5 degree mark or 2.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial revolution ages, then yeah, all those things that we see now as bad as related to climate change are going to get exponentially worse. And yes, I could see many, many inconveniences coming down the line due to that. And yet they're saying to see these as opportunities to be of service to others that can actually help us greatly in moving into fourth density. I do find that encouraging. Any thoughts on this, Renat, from this passage?
The one word I think we haven't mentioned yet is catalyst. So this is the catalyst, the component, the strife that is pushing us to make a choice, to wake up. And the choice could be either to negative or positive polarity. It's our choice, but like the teacher is waking up the sleepy students. Either you're gonna do this test or that test, but you have to make a choice. You can't just sit there and glare at the blackboard or whiteboard. You have to make a choice which way you're gonna go. And yeah, I see, as I said before, I see more and more of my friends that I guess might have never woken up to start, start seeking spirituality, being open to anything that is beyond the here and now, the material, the narrative. And I see more of my friends like stepping up, and I'm so always surprised. It's just amazing. And I can give you an example. I think it relates to what we said before about people needing more tactile experience with the earth and the plants. I have a friend in England who's been working on these community gardens for a number of years, 4, 5, 6. And she said it only now people are starting to come and be interested. And I said, yes, because of I didn't say catalyst because she's not from this understanding of the law of one, but yeah, because the shit is hitting the fan, and to wake people up to what is really important to them. That's why they're coming, and her organization is really growing fast, and they're building greenhouses, and it's so encouraging because she's been struggling for such a long time because she really believes in sustainability and educating people and the food system and all that. So I'm like, okay, so they wake up one by one. It's so beautiful to
Right.
see. That's because of the catalyst, I believe. I really believe that.
Yeah, I appreciate your bringing that word into the conversation, and I appreciate your sharing those stories. It's, I think, a good example of what Jasmine was saying, where if you're of the mindset that everything is terrible and people are terrible, then that's probably all you're going to see. But if you're on the mindset that things are good and there are spiritual awakenings happening, then guess what? Maybe you'll actually notice them and seeing them as you are. I think that's a really beautiful lesson for all of our viewers. Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, not too much. I would just kind of speaking along the same lines, like there's always catalyst available, and I think we might be coming into some intense catalyst. I think there is humor in how Ra is referring it to an inconvenience, because I think these inconveniences can be interpreted as being like tidal waves and people starving and lack of water and little inconveniences like that. But it's I think it's funny because Ra is speaking from perspective of timelessness and of kind of seeing the whole big picture that we don't see from our veiled positions. So so part of me is I can hear Ra saying all is well through all of this, because like even as we're going through this intense catalyst and experience of Earth in 3D as we're transitioning, it's still a good concept to keep in the back of the mind that this is all temporary and we're all infinite beings. We're just having this human experience, and we're helping this planet Earth evolve and progress and on its own journey. And I don't know, it's quite an interesting time to be alive. And I keep coming back to that.
Sure.
We all fought tooth and nail to be alive right now and experience the Earth in this life. So just enjoy the ride, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good reminder. I think it was in the podcast episode on balance where we talked about being able to dolly back and pull back and look at what's happening on Earth from a little bit of distance and space, look at what's happening now in the timeline as a very, very small blip in the longer scale of time. So appreciate your reminder of that. Jasmine, anything to add?
Yeah, to echo what you and Ben said, what Quo calls inconveniences, many of us call these regional and global catastrophes. But it's because of the fact that we look at it from a very finite perspective. Maybe our perspective is 90 years old at the most. And so, of course, if you think about the end of human civilization as we know it, yeah, that's a little bit more than an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe. But I think the one thing, if we settle down and breathe into it and roll with it, we really have to understand and consider some scientific facts. First of all, this is not the first time our planet has experienced climate change. It just may be that I think the last time was the Maunder minimum where there was a very minimal amount of humans, a very minimal number of humans alive at the time, and many of them did die. But obviously, not all of humanity died, because we're sitting here today talking about it. Our planet has gone through many upheavals. It's just that there were no humans around to talk about it and worry about it and tweet about it. So this is a natural cycle that our great mother goes through. And we just have to understand we are here for this amount of time, maybe even a little less. I can't make my fingers go any closer. And so, yeah, like Jonathan said, if we stop looking at what's happening today from this perspective and remember that as energy beings, as beings of light, we've been around for billions of years. We've seen not only this planet come to life, but we have seen the birth and death of stars. These things happen. And as far as human civilization on this planet, you know, some people now are theorizing that we are not the first iteration of third density bipedal beings on this planet. This planet is, you know, they keep changing the date, but this planet is about 4 billion years old, able to support life for at least 2 billion years. So now scientists think, archaeologists think, that this is not the first time humans have been here, have risen to be technology giants like we think we are today, and have destroyed themselves. But I think this may be the first time in recorded human history on this planet that we have been in a position to really destroy the whole planet. I mean, let's face it.
Certainly
China,
Atlantis
Russia,
would be a good example.
they destroyed their civilization. But I think if
Yeah.
you consider the arsenal that the United States, China, and Russia have, there's enough firepower to destroy the entire planet. I don't know that that's ever happened before, but that's where we're at now.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and even though we might disagree on details as far as climate change and fossil fuels and stuff is concerned, I think we can harmonize our differences in agreeing that we both care about the earth and we both care about taking as good care of it as possible. And I think that's something I'm happy to agree on. Let's take a look at another passage on this subject, and this was from February 10th, 2002. Quo said, "These entities who seek the negative polarization will have their day, in fact are having their day at this time, so that they may accomplish that which they set for themselves, with their only regard for others being that which affects themselves. This is what you may see as a very brightly burning flame that will consume much about it for a short period of your time. There will be, following the exit of this influence from this planet, the continued experience of service to others by those who have chosen this path, for there will be a continuing need for a great deal of each serving each other. There will be the obvious requirements of living the daily life under conditions which may be less than conducive to accomplishing this task with comfort. The abilities of entities to express their choice of seeking to serve other selves and to seek what you might call within the positivity will be enhanced by the difficulties which have begun and which shall continue apace. That which might be seen as turmoil, as lack of necessities, and so forth in the days and years to come, will be heavy laden with opportunity to others. Thus, each will become aware more and more fully of the unity of all creation and all entities within the creation, as it becomes more and more necessary for each to aid each other in the ability to accomplish the daily round of activities under circumstances which may be seen to be a difficult, even severe nature. Yet these entities shall prevail, for as one seeks to serve other selves and sees other selves as the one creator, each is pursuing the path of that which is. For indeed, each is a portion of the one creator. Each is inextricably linked with each other self and these ties will bind each into what you have called a nation of priests. Each will feel the power of the one Creator moving through the vehicle in order that the one Creator might be glorified in each thought, each activity, each experience. These will be times which few will have desired before going through them, but which each and every one will be most grateful to have experienced when they are going through them and as they are completing these services. Yeah, I've read this passage through many, many times over, also mulling over the good news, bad news that I'm seeing in this passage. The bad news, I believe they're saying, is it's going to be really difficult just getting through what we consider normal daily activities in the not that distant future is going to be really difficult, and we're all going to need each other to do that. And what they're saying is, it's not the kind of thing that you would have wished for before, but that, as they said in the very last line, each and every one will be most grateful to have experienced, which when they are going through them as they're completing these services. There's a lot that I think Renat also mentioned in her last sharing about the awakening that's coming as more and more people are aware of the unity of creation and the Creator in themselves and others. I think there's signs for hope there. What do you think, Ben? Any thoughts on this passage?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward on this one. So it kind of goes along the lines of a lot of the prophecy that we're supposedly coming into about, I've heard about pole shifts and mass war and all the other traumas you can think of, and this is kind of echoing that energy. And I don't know if I necessarily always like to bring about this energy, because I feel like when we talk about that, there's going to be this massive catastrophe or whatever we're going to experience. That kind of gives it more energy and brings it about, even maybe brings it about. So hopefully it won't be this as terrible as Raz or Quo was saying back in 2002. But I think that there's always, as I said before, there's always opportunity to serve, and I think perhaps a situation like this is coming about because there's so many people who are not polarized, who are indifferent, who have to make a decision one way or another to evolve. And so perhaps that is why this type of situation is going to come into being. But I still have faith that maybe maybe it won't be as harsh as Rob or as Quo was thinking in 2002. Maybe perhaps we've evolved a little bit, but I'm open to all pathways, and I am trying to live in acceptance and even gratitude for being here.
Indeed. Yeah, well said. Man, it kind of reminds me of other passages where Ra was discussing different possibility vortices as they saw them. And yes, I'm sure there are other possibility vortices that don't involve these kind of things, but I can certainly see high probability of this stuff coming just from what I'm seeing happening right now. It doesn't really take a rocket scientist to kind of see the trajectory that we're on and what is likely to happen if we don't change like dramatically. But I appreciate you bringing up the sinkhole of the difference, because I think that is a big part of it. Big part of why we don't get as many people graduating to service to others or service self on fourth density is they kind of get stuck sitting on the fence and don't really pick a side, don't pick a path to follow, and don't follow it purely enough. And I think, as you were suggesting, I think it could be that these dire circumstances are actually what gets people out of that sinkhole, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. What do you think, Renat? Anything to add?
I thought Jasmine was last.
Actually, I meant Jasmine. Jasmine, did you have anything to add?
Just that the choice, I think things are going to get worse. I'm sorry, Ben. I think things are going to get awful, probably a lot worse than we could ever imagine. And I like in the passage how Quo talks about the horrors that we're about to face is really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for those of us who've chosen the right-hand path to step out and be of great, immense service to others. And I'm also reminded that our incarnation here, along with all of our other selves, was a choice that we made. And it could possibly be, Renat talked earlier about souls. It could possibly be that the soul that primarily animates Renat and Ben got together and said, you know, Jasmine's mentioned that she wanted to learn unconditional love. So we're going to help her in that. We're going to present ourselves as an opportunity for her to express unconditional love. And perhaps, even though it's difficult for us to process, perhaps my learning unconditional love means that I have to forgive the person, say Ben, who really did great injury to me by perhaps harming my son. So
This is all hypothetical, right?
of course, I'm sorry, I keep picking on Ben only because he's on the far right of my screen and he's easy to see. But yeah, it's all, of course, it's hypothetical. But I think we have to remember, though, that, you know, we're taught that our being here is a choice. We chose to incarnate here. We chose to incarnate in this space time, in this particular life situation. And as hard as it is for us to reconcile, some of the tragedies that we see are actually soul choices. And those souls chose that tragedy perhaps to help others advance. And as far as the upcoming potential horrors that we're about to experience on our planet, I just like to remind us, if your goal is to build your muscles, if you're a bodybuilder and you want to end up looking like like a Mr. Universe or something, you know, you don't go to the gym and you don't work out with 5-pound weights. And so in order for some of us to move on, in order for some of us to clear our karmic debt, we have to do some heavy lifting. And heavy lifting means the entire planet is not the Garden of Eden. There's going to have to be some horrors and some tragedies in order for us to do the heavy lifting that our soul needs to do to advance.
For sure. Resistance training, I believe, is the term that's used for that. And I think that's a great, excellent metaphor for where we're at. Renat, anything to add?
Yeah, I like the resistance training that Jasmine spoke about, because that's how I described my being here during the war. Coming here, 5 minutes before the war. Somehow I chose to really put on some muscle. On the other hand, I'm sorry, I can't stay here forever. It's gonna break me, which brings me to things I thought about, building on everything that was said. Is that reminds me of those ultra rich people who build bunkers and stuff. And lately I've heard that they added some rifles to the bunker. So I don't know. Even if I'm invited, I'm not going down there. But it reminds me of a friend of mine, also from the Law of One community, a friend of his has spoke about her end of the world bunker plan, and she asked him, "What's your plan? What are you gonna do?" And he said, I don't want a bunker. I'm gonna run out and see whom I can help." And I thought that was beautiful. I really loved him for saying that, but I'm not sure how many people I can help. But yeah, I will keep that in mind on the day. But and my thought is, and I think it's from Ra, who said, what's the worst that can happen if you're going to lose your second density body? That's my take on that. It's like I came here into this body during this time, into this place, but that's all temporary. I'm not that attached. I don't want to suffer, but I'm not that attached to this vehicle. What I am attached is to my mission and to my essence, which is my soul, which is not easily destroyed. That's my take on all this, end of the day and catastrophe. I'm not too scared.
I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And, Yeah, it just kind of reminds me of a group of people in a lifeboat together after the boat sank, and there's probably going to be people on the boat that you're not necessarily friends with and people you don't necessarily get along with otherwise. But guess what? You're going to need each other to survive. And I'm guessing that's going to be the situation for a lot of us. We're all going to need each other to survive, and it may well be that person who lives just a couple doors down from you who you fucking hate, or who has like really different views from you. But guess what? You're going to need each other, and you probably have different ways that you can help each other survive. And that's how we get to fourth density. I have a couple more passages that I wanted to read. Okay, if we move on and start winding things down, let's take a look at a couple passages on reasons for hope. There are two slides to this one. On February 6, 2016, Quo said, and believe it or not, this has been edited for brevity, "Realize, my friends, that the free will of your planet is most difficult to predict, for there are forces moving from ancient of days that would work against such harvest, those entities of a darker variety which seek in their own manner to be harvested by controlling the light of this harvest. And yet they shall fail, for the legions of the service to self entities will have only a short day where they shall reign supreme, and then their day shall be over, and the light shall shine, and the harvest shall be complete. And those who seek service to others shall find a new fourth density home upon this planet. For this planet shall be a fourth density positive planet, even with all the seeming darkness, strife, wars, control, and negativity that have plagued this planet for thousands of your years. This planet, my friends, is unique, and it is unique in ways that not every planet at the point of its movement from third to fourth density has been unique. In particular, it has featured a certain set of balances between the forces of positivity, as we might call them, and the forces of negativity. This is one of the reasons why your planet has been of great interest to both sides of the evolutionary process, the positive and the negative, and why what you might call a contest or tug of war in the heavens has unfolded for many eons in your past. Those who have been through the trial by ordeal, as we might call it, where they have been required to sift through a significant portion of their experience that is seemingly tinted with the signature of negative energy, in an attempt to turn and allow the negativity to feed into a system in which positivity arises as a result. Those who have been through this process, we say, will have to offer to the creation a particular kind of view, the particular strength of spiritual being that those who have evolved in a more harmonious context can but little appreciate, but are learning more and more to understand the significance of. What is interesting about those souls, those complexes of mind, body, and spirit who grow upon this plane, is that they will have had experiences in relation to the negative focus of energy, which is what we might call up close and personal. They will have had intimate experience in transmuting negative energies, in some cases of a rather high order, into a positive manifestation. And it is this experience which will give them a certain strength, a certain insight, a certain vibratory character, which will be very gladly received by their brothers and sisters of other planets, of other densities, which will be then given the opportunity to explore dimensions of the creation that have previously not been available for close inspection, shall we say. Yeah, great example of what somebody said earlier about, man, we never know what's going on or why things are the way they are. Many times have I wondered, well, if Earth is supposed to be a fourth density positive planet, why do they keep putting so many service to self assholes on this planet? Why are there so many of them here? And I guess apparently, well, there's lots of different ways to look at it. One is just the balancing of karma that everyone needs to do. And another way of looking at it is, I guess, kind of what they're describing here is that, yeah, service to self entities who get to experience such service to others entities who get to experience so much service to self entities and energy up close and personal, yeah, really gain a spiritual strength of the heavy lifting sort that Jasmine was referring to earlier. that entities who grow up in more harmonious environments just can't relate and understand to. So when we leave this incarnation, those experiences that we bring back to these social memory complexes that we came from, if we're wanderers, or back to Creator, will be very much appreciated and received, and will very much help in the evolution that continues after this. It's a beautiful way of looking at it, I think. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts on this passage?
Yeah, when I read this passage, the first thing I thought of is it sounds like the book of Revelations, where he's talking about harvesting, the good from the bad, separating the wheat from the chaff, and so forth. So that was just my first thought. It sounds like the book of Revelations in the Bible. When I read this passage, though, I really had more of a question, I think, than a reflection. And that was basically, how does Quo know? How does he know that this planet is going to polarize positive? And so I started going down that rabbit hole and starting, trying to remember that time and the way we experience time, it's like 1:16 on this planet, or my time zone anyway, that's just a construct of my own consciousness, that the time that's on the clock really has nothing to do at all with time. And so Quo being, of course, from a higher density, certainly they experience time differently. And I'm wondering if it's possible that Quo is able to see into our time stream, see forward into our time stream, to know how this planet is going to polarize. And if in fact the social memory complex known as Quo, if he can in fact see our future, I'm wondering if it would be a violation of like their prime directive to just give us some clues, because what we don't want to do, we're on this time stream, we don't want to end up splitting off and causing another whole time stream if we really mess things up. So
yeah, that is a good question that I imagine any one reasonable person would be wondering when they read those references to Earth becoming a fourth density positive planet. I think I would love to hear the other panelists' thoughts on that. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that Ra did say that this logos has a bias towards kindness. So in that sense, if Earth was allowed to develop as it's meant to be, it would be a fourth density positive planet. We just happen to have this tug of war between those who are trying to graduate in service to others and those who are in fact trying to graduate to service to self. But I suspect, as you said, because they are hundreds of millions of years ahead of us in spiritual evolution, they are able to see various probability, possibility vortices in our future, although they can never say for sure, but it seems more likely than not that we will. But I would suppose, to be fair, you could probably say there probably is some probability, possibility vortex of that not actually happening, and I'm sure that's what service to self entities are banking on for sure. What do you think, Renat? Any thoughts on what Jasmine said, or anything on this passage?
This is a session from 2016 when it was, I don't know, determined, said that in 2012 planet has turned positive. So I'm not sure why they're using future language. Yeah, but the future is possibility, probability, which means that we are the co-creators. It's not set for us. It's not, and it's beautiful. I really, since I was young, I didn't like that, everything is set in stone for you. So why am I here? It's boring if everything is set. Then I could be replaced with somebody else. I can have a vacation. But I wanted to say something about, the boat imagery you brought before, and also why so many assholes here. Well, imagine that on this boat, the somehow the scenario is that you end up having the opportunity to save the life of the most horrible person on that boat. What are you going to do? You're going to let them drown, and you hate them. Let's say they really hurt you earlier. Are you going to let them drown? And what if you don't let them drown? What if you save them? How will it affect you and the other person? So I think that, the micro example of the macro tug of war, or, you're probably not going to be friends with that person, but something is going to change for sure. And, some evolution is going to happen, I think, towards some positive dimension. So that's my little thought.
Yeah, indeed. And they have said many times that, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the future because the future is mazed by all who look at it, and free will decisions of all 8 billion souls on here right now can change the future. So I believe that's why we're here, to do the best we can to help make it happen in a good way. What do you think, Ben? Any thoughts on anything?
Yeah, a few. So first off, I think that from Quo's point of view, Quo is looking at everything from a point of timelessness. So I think that it's like looking at a painting that's already completed. Like, we're in the middle of the painting still while it's being painted, so we don't know how things are, and we don't even know what the other brushstrokes around us are. So I think and Quo is looking at the completed painting, and I guess maybe from that perspective, from that pulled back position, Quo can see the direction of the evolution of the Earth, or even can see that the Earth is already graduated. That's my guess, because obviously none of us can know for sure, but that's my idea. And my idea about the situation of the drowning person, I think that if I always think about like karmic and how and karma and that energy and how things keep going and perpetually. So if you have this situation where someone has let's say someone committed a trauma or some kind of heinous act toward you, and you have this opportunity to save them or help them, I think that even as hard as it would be, it's your duty to try to help them, because they are you. And they say, if we're trying to advance as a being, as a soul, then you want to help them and progress. And so I think if you don't, you're going to be karmically tied to that soul in the next incarnation or the next incarnation, and there's going to be this energy that's going back and forth until the forgiveness is found and resolution is created between these two beings, and then there's harmony, which is what fourth density is all about. So I think that it's really hard to see, though, when you're in third density in the veil and carrying trauma. Obviously, it's hard to find the compassion, but it's still there. It's still there in our hearts, and I think Ra has also spoken on this. Fourth density is moving out of this and moving into our heart, and less talking, less of this and more of this. And so I think that's the energy I'm grasping from this and pulling from it. So
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think that's a really good segue into the last passage that I think we're going to read today, which is from September 7th, 2003. Quo said, "The time is such that until far beyond the end of each of your incarnations, experiences shall be very intense, for the energies of change have begun long ago and are now in full swing, and move towards a conclusion that is not a moment in time precisely, and yet there is a point at which your planet shall be fourth density positive, and those who are within third density upon the planet shall only be able to endure and remain within the planetary atmosphere because they have begun living and thinking in a fourth density compatible manner." So the third thing that we would say concerning responding to change is to ask yourself, if I were in fourth density, how would I perceive this situation? As the one known as Ra has said to this group before, where is the love in the moment? This is the thinking of fourth density. It is that thinking that assumes total acceptance of all beings, total equality of all soul streams, total oneness with everybody, and an inability not to harmonize. When one as a third density self feels the disharmony, one may be aware that one is simply living and thinking and reacting according to the illusion of third density. We ask that you consider this as one of two choices, one of indeed infinite choices. But the other choice that we would recommend is that choice of moving into the sacred region of the heart. For the heart has never left the unconditional love of the one infinite creator that exists within first density, second density, third density, fourth density, fifth density, and so on. Such a beautiful passage that, again, I have gone back and read and reread this many times over as I am realizing that so much of how I am responding to, let's say, current events happening around us, I'm really responding to it in a third density way. And that I am consciously trying to shift my way of thinking and to let go of third density ways of looking at the world and living it, and thinking more in terms of fourth density, which is total acceptance of all beings, regardless, equality of all soul streams, including the ones that I least understand and agree with, total oneness with everyone, and an inability not to harmonize. That harmonizing part is the part I think that keeps coming back to me, because as they said in that first passage, it's not like there aren't any differences in fourth density. There are still pronounced differences. It's just that people learn to harmonize them together. So I think the more that we can learn to harmonize differences and accept others without having to change them or thinking they need to change the way they think, seems like the best way to adapt, shall we say, to fourth density and to help plant the ground for it to grow. And that's for each of us to do in the way that we see is best, I think. That is my thought and opinion on it. Renat, any thoughts, opinions on this?
I was really struck by the last sentence. For the heart is never left down dark, that we have to hold on to remember to put chiefly our main resource, which is the heart, the love. So it's really about tapping into our resources, our existing resource. It's not, reinventing the wheel, reinventing the heart. It's already there. It's about tapping into that, reminding yourself to tap into that. And that question, where is the love in the moment? Where is the love in the action that, or in the thought I'm going to share, the action I'm going to act upon? Where is the love? And that to me, I don't, because then okay, what does it mean, love? If let's say you let go of a friend who has hurt you, you might judge yourself. Oh, I'm not showing that person any love, but then you can interpret it. Well, I'm showing myself love, and actually maybe showing the person love because I'm not allowing them to hurt me any further. So it goes kind of unfurls and unfurls and unfurls, but it's okay that it's not a very easily answered question. But as long as we keep the focus on that question, on that idea, then I think we'll find the light, and we'll find more candles to put on in the cave.
Yeah, I love that image. I love the visual, the candles and the lights in the darkness. It's beautiful. Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, I kind of also like that last sentence. I feel like so if you take that concept that the heart is always connected to the one infinite creator, and we all have these beating hearts in our chests that are constantly thumping along, and I think that when I try to connect with the infinite creator, I always feel like when I'm having moments of contemplation or even in meditation, if I feel insights coming up, it always feels like it comes from my heart, like it bubbles up wordlessly, and then then my mind kind of interprets the concept and kind of is like, oh yeah, I should be a better person in this way. And I think in that same sense that I talked about earlier, how we should look at every other self as a toddler, you can also do the opposite and look at every other self as their highest self and their best version. And you can do this with any human alive right now. And then you can kind of accept the fact that we're all at different points in the wheel of progression, so, and no one is better than anyone else. Some of us are more evolved, but we're all on earth together. We're all in this pot together cooking. And so it helps to harmonize. And I think when you can look at someone as, of course, I'm flawed, and this person obviously has their own biases and traumas that have influenced their views that might be flawed as well. If we can at least start from that point and accept that we both have these flaws and these misconceptions of reality, then maybe we can find some baseline where we can all agree on, and maybe that's the beginning path of recognizing that we are all one being, and that we're all we're all of one mind. Even we're just veiled and separated right now, but it's all an illusion. And so we have to recognize that there's an illusion, and recognize that we have these biases that might not be particularly correct. And I think if you can start with that, maybe you can find peace with others.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate your mentioning the part about everybody's at different stages of their journey. I think it kind of echoes what they said in the second paragraph, second sentence, the equality of all soul streams, and expecting somebody to look at things, have the same understandings as you is like expecting someone of different age to be of the same maturity. Doesn't mean one person is better or worse than the other. People are at just different stages. They are perfect as they are. That's something I'm struggling to work with. I definitely am not perfect in that sense. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts, reflections on this?
Yeah, I just love what Ben said. The one thing that I would add is I think what helps in the process of helping us to remember that at our core is the pure white auric light of God's love. That's all we are. But what helps us remember that is to practice radical forgiveness. Once we learn to forgive, as soon as we do that, the space opens up for us to find that love. And we really don't have to find it. It's there. It's always been there. It's just that we didn't have a conscious connection to it. So by practicing radical forgiveness, forgive, 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 the instant somebody transgresses against you or you perceive a slight, forgive them. And without even thinking about it, the instant you say something that's a bit off color, forgive yourself. And I think as long as we can go through that process of continual forgiveness, nothing sticks. With many of us, I feel, and I've learned that part of the reason that we're so out of touch with that pure white auric light of God's love, which emanates from all of us, is it's kind of covered. It's gotten encrusted with all this negativity. And a lot of it has to do with holding on to past grudges and slights that we perceive have happened to us. And a lot of times, I think it comes from not forgiving ourselves. But if we can practice radical forgiveness, just let it go. Someone yells at you, Jonathan reaches over and he hits me. All right, here's the other cheek, Jonathan.
Hypothetically, yeah.
Hypothetically, just forgive. And I think that just opens the space up for that unconditional love, which we're all trying to get to.
For sure. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up that part of forgiveness, because it is key, and I don't think we've really talked about it so much, but it reminds me of what was said in the earlier passage about each time somebody chooses forgiveness instead of revenge or retribution, that really is planting the seeds for fourth density, and that's something that each of us can do in our own way. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Forgiveness, as they said, is key to stopping the wheels of karma. And karma is coming up as an episode in the not too distant future, I believe. For now, though, as far as this episode is concerned, where do we go from here? What are some takeaway lessons we could get from the last 2-hour plus discussion that we've had? Maybe for starters, if you understand and remember that fourth density is the density of love and understanding. It's both our present and our future. And that is involved in unconditional love. That would be great. If you can remember that Earth is already vibrating in fourth density and it's just waiting for humanity to catch up, then that's for each of us to do, to start vibrating more in fourth density. integrating shadow self is really important. No more fighting, no more wars between forces of light and darkness, but choosing not to fight and to choose love of your enemy and your shadow self as necessary for us to become whole. I'd say that's pretty good. Letting the old die, embracing the new, recognizing that perhaps our institutions and cultural traditions are indeed going to be changing, but thinking about what were the best parts of those that we want to carry into future. Be good. And remember that any inconveniences that we might experience in the near or not that distant future, to look at them and welcome them as opportunities for service to others. Pretty good lesson. And remembering that total acceptance and harmonizing of others makes you a spiritual badass and is really going to help you in the future, and as well as your social memory complex that you rejoin and the creator when you go back to creator. What do you think? Ben, any takeaway lessons of your own you'd like to add, or any final thoughts, reflections on this before we wrap up?
Yeah, I always just think that it's really easy to feel bogged down and heavy with all this spiritual stuff, but I'm constantly reminded that it's all about light. Fourth density is all about bringing in the light and the love. It's actually going to be really, really joyous and harmonious. And I think that third density, I think Ra has even said that third density is like one of the toughest densities to go through. So have that, like, give yourself a break if you're feeling that heaviness, because that heaviness that you're feeling is third density, like that weight that we feel, that anxiety about society right now that I'm sure a lot of people watching are feeling right now. That is third density. So take a breath and reconnect with your heart, and remember that this is all an illusion, and we're all just stumbling around in the dark. No one knows any better. No one is any better than anyone else. And you know, the way we get through this is together. And so don't forget to laugh, and don't forget to listen to the music too, because there's a lot of good stuff here too. So
There is some great music out there for sure. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Jasmine, any takeaway lessons of your own you'd like to add, or final thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, final thoughts are just meditate daily. Do a check on yourself by asking, if I were my higher self right now, what would I say in this situation, and what would I do? And really listen to what comes up for you. And like Ben said, kind of have fun with it. Things are tough, but have fun with it, because at the end of the day, you're just a spiritual being having a physical experience. And this may feel totally real to you, may feel totally solid. It is not. It is not. Read a book on physics, you'll see. They've known this for a long time. You're just a pulse of energy. And I think honestly, we have a choice. This can be our heaven, or this can be our hell. But the beauty of it is it is all your choice, not mine. So meditate. What would I do if I were living as my higher self, and make a choice and commit to have fun.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Renat, any takeaway lessons of your own you'd like to add, or final thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, I'm speaking to our imaginary audience, because we're like on a stage, like a panel on the stage, but we don't see our audience. So imagining the audience, I could imagine that if they're here, if you guys are here listening to this, or even part of this, you probably already are a change to the four density, to the walk into the light, the evolution to the better. And this is not an isolated planet, it's part of the universe. So we're all part of this evolution. So I'm going to give all of us, the imaginary audience and the panel, final package.
Nice. Well said. Panel, it's been a joy. You are the best panel we have had yet. And I know I say that to every panel, but this time I really, really mean it. So yeah, indeed, I believe it would be time to go ahead and wrap things up with a pop quiz. quiz. Pop quizzes, of course, are something we like to do in these sessions just to kind of end on a fun note and maybe look for law of one connections in pop culture. So since today's episode was about fourth density, today's pop quiz is going to be about famous fours in pop culture. And it's going to be different in a couple ways. First of all, this time, instead of playing as individuals, you're going to be playing as a group. It says practice in forming a social memory complex. Second, the questions are not going to be multiple choice or true false. I'm just going to show you 4 photos of 4 famous groups of 4 in pop culture. Your challenge is to see if, as a group, you can name the group correctly and the names of all 4 constituent members. So each question is worth a total of 5 points. 1 point for the name of the group, 1 point for the names of each of the 4 members. As always, the points don't matter. If you had fun, you won. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
All right, your first famous group of 4 is this group. Can you name the group?
I can.
Yes.
I can. Yes.
Go ahead, you can just shout them out.
Do it,
Oh,
Renat.
the Beatles.
They are the Beatles. So you got 1 point for that. Can you
Huzzah.
name all 4 of the Beatles? And again, you don't have to just shout them out, however.
John, Paul, George, Ringo.
What?
Last names. Do we
John
get
Paul.
extra?
Oh, okay. Got it.
Ringo Starr,
John
John
Lennon,
Lennon,
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney, and George
uh,
Harrison.
Wow.
Yeah.
I should give you extra points for including the last names and identifying each one correctly, but I'm not going to do that. So you got 5 points.
I'm gonna ask for another point for thinking it's gonna show us the Beatles. No, that's too familiar. No, yeah.
You got to start. They were known as the Fab Four, I believe, back in the day. And yeah, I think in many ways, boy, they were, I think most anyone would agree that they were responsible for introducing Eastern spiritualism and mysticism to Western pop culture. They were really the first pop group that brought sitars in, and they went to India and hung out with the Maharishi. And I believe at some point in an interview, they said that they had come to see the 4 themselves as basically 4 different faces of one entity manifested in 4 different personalities, which of course is very law of one. Yeah, beautiful. How about your next? We're gonna try something different. Can you name these 4?
The Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four. And can you name the 4 members of the Fantastic Four?
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know if I know any of them.
Do you
There's
know any, Jasmine?
Rubber Man, the flexible Rubber Man. He would be the 3rd one from my right.
Huh? Do you know his name in the comics? What his proper social name was?
Rubber Man. I know.
Stretch Armstrong.
No. Oh, that's cute.
I don't know.
Let's keep going. Let's
Okay.
keep going. Who else you got there? You got 3 other individuals.
Is the one the Thing or is it
The Thing,
Thing? Okay.
on the far left.
The guy on the far left, yeah. And that is all. I don't really know the Fantastic Four very well, unfortunately.
Me either.
Renat, you know any of these guys? Okay. Well, you got Fantastic Four. You did get the Thing. Next to the Thing is the Invisible Girl or Invisible Woman, also known as Sue Storm. Reed Richards was the stretchy guy, also known as Mr. Fantastic, I believe. Rubber Band guy, I think, was actually another character from another comic book or something. And the guy on the far right is Johnny Storm, I believe, or the Human Torch, as they're known.
Oh.
Fun comic book series. I read a lot of Fantastic Four comic books, and looking forward to this movie that I believe is coming out this summer. We'll see what they do with it. Speaking of comic books, so you got 2 points on that one. For your third one, let's take a look at 4 other comic book characters. Can you name these 4 entities?
Yeah.
Of course.
And they are.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Can you name the 4 of them?
I can name one of them.
Go for it.
Leonardo.
Got one. That's good.
Named after the Renaissance artists Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo.
Show
Wow.
off. What
Nice.
a show off.
I used to have all the toys and everything, so this is my generation for sure.
I have never watched a single cartoon or movie with these guys. I never quite understood it, but
Wait, did anybody catch that shade that Ben just kind of launched? This is my generation for, are you trying to say I'm
sorry.
old?
No, I didn't mean to say that. But that was my
I believe that is what he said, though. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Pardon me. That was my mistake, misspeaking.
Well, we'll test your age on the next one, because this one I believe is going to be a little bit more challenging for everybody, I think. Can you name this famous group of four?
Haven't a clue.
I'll give you a hint. They were from Motown and they had the word four in their name.
The oh no. No, what?
Can you think of a Motown group that had the word four in their name? Very popular group, great songs.
No. The Four Tops.
Four Tops is it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Congratulations, person watching on video who got that also. You're showing your age. I wouldn't expect anybody to name the members of the Four Tops. I believe Levi Stubb was the main singer, third from the left. I could not tell you the names of the other four, but I will give you 4 points if you can name 4 songs by the Four Tops. Anybody remember names of songs, hit songs from the Four Tops?
Yeah.
I don't.
Reach out, I'll be there. Da, 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 da. The same old song with a different meaning since you've been gone. Or
Okay.
baby, I need your loving.
Okay.
Got to have all. It's so beautiful songs. And sugar pie, honey bunch. I can't help myself. That's me singing. That is the last time you're ever going to hear me sing on this podcast. It's why I generally don't do it. But love those songs.
Jonathan. Do you do karaoke, Jonathan?
I would need to drink a lot more before I did karaoke. Yeah, for sure. And I'm drinking tea this morning, so it ain't going to happen.
I was wondering what's in the mug.
Yeah. Such beautiful songs, though, and so timeless. I mean, if you haven't heard any of those songs in a while, go back and listen to them. And they hit as beautifully now as they did when they first came out 60 years ago. And I would like to think 60 to 100 years from now, they're still going to be as beautiful. So I encourage you to check it out. Let's see. I believe, panelists, you came up with 5, 10, 13 points, which is pretty good, I would say, all things considered. And as we said, as the points don't matter, if you had fun, you won. But you watching on video point, if you got a higher score than the panel, you probably had more fun. So I want to thank everyone. Panelists, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. Thank you for being here. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done, continue to do in service to others. And to anyone who's still watching the video at this point, I have a special gift for you. I've run YouTube analytics on our podcast, and according to YouTube analytics, there's only about 10 people who typically watch a typical podcast episode all the way to the end. So if you are one of those 10 people who are still watching at this point, email me at seattlelaw1@gmail.com. Put the words fourth density in the subject title, and I have a special gift that I would like to send you as a thank you for being one of our most valued viewers. Again, if you are still watching the video at this point, email me at seattlelaw1@gmail.com. Put the words fourth density in the subject line and let us know that you enjoy the videos, and I have a special thank you gift for you. And to anyone who's still watching this in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Adonai, namaste. We'll see you.